Trigger on!
Welcome, D-Roll, to the Duckface Diaries. We are a World Trigger read-through podcast aiming to discuss the World Trigger manga volume by volume. I'm Wensleydale, Cheddar.
And I'm Hoven with an H. And this week we'll be And this week we'll be breaking down Volume 2 of Daisuke Ashihara's wonderful sci-fi shonen.
We'll be taking good care of it, just excellent care of it. How are you doing, mate?
I'm doing alright. I have been dog-sitting for a while, and since last episode I am fully up to date with the manga, so I am no longer a Cheddar casual, as it were.
Nice. Wait, you aren't my patron. What are you talking about? I've also had animal-related experiences this week since we've adopted a kitty. Her name is Unibi, and she's adorable, and I love her.
I'm so happy for you.
She's been keeping us at night since she's a very small bebe.
That's the thing about like high maintenance pets. They're lovely, but they're high maintenance.
Yeah. So for today's agenda, we're going to do a quick recap of the second volume, do our general thoughts, do some random observations that we haven't mentioned, and then answer the question that we got this month.
Yippee!
Right, so do you want to get started?
Yes, let's. So, from where we picked up in last volume, Osamu sends Yuma to assist Kitora against the neighbours while he looks out for civilians with assistance from Replica. Kitora dispatches the Ilgar fairly efficiently, but it's downed and it lurches dangerously close to a populated area on the shore just by pure instinct. Kuga uses Trion chains to yank it down, allowing it to self-destruct harmlessly in the river. So the commander calls Jin in as he's perched atop of this massive neighbour that he's defeated, and, sorry, I'm really bad at reading my notes out.
It's fine. It's fine. I usually edit this shit out of my portion, but finally we're going to be equals.
Yes, indeed. Okay. So the commander calls Jin in as, once again, he's perched atop a massive neighbour he's defeated as this big show of strength. We've seen this visual used before in the very first chapter. And we meet Border's top brass at Osamu's review meeting, and I'm just going to say, they look very different to the recent manga. Kinuta and Netsuki in particular. You can even see their faces change quite a lot just in the second appearance they have this volume. So we meet all the directors, and there is some debate between them as to whether they should fire Osamu from Border or promote him. Osamu's issue, however, is very quickly sidelined for the real problem of the abnormal gates. Jin is asked to be given charge of Osamu's punishment due to it's just like I've conducted your stammers today. And it's always to do with Jin. Am I nervous around Jin? Is that it? Jin asks to be given charge of Osamu's punishment due to what is his side effect, tells him, and thinks that he's involved somehow with these abnormal gates. Shuji Miwa, an A-rank agent present, questions Osamu on the incident from Chapter 1, and after Osamu lies, saying that he's dealt with the neighbour, we learn that Miwa suspects him because there's evidence of another trigger there, so not all their tracks were covered, clearly. Kuga investigates the school at night based on Replica's suggestion, and then the next day, Jin meets Kuga and immediately figures out he's a neighbour, explaining that this through his side effect to see the future. Kuga reveals the abnormal gates that are a result of these small recon neighbours called Rads. All the Rads are then exterminated in 24 hours. Well done, Border. Jin suggests that Osamu take credit and be promoted to B rank. A young girl finds Yuma attempting to ride a bike and helps him and introduces herself as Chika Amatori. A siren then goes off and she immediately leaves in the direction of the attack, seemingly noticing it before the siren. She tries to lure it away, but it still attacks her and she's barely saved by Kuga. Osamu, who seems to be looking for her, arrives in his new B-rank uniform and dispatches it. Osamu scolds Chika and tells Osamu that he called her over and that she has a tendency to attract neighbours.
So Osamu introduces Chika to Yuma properly, hoping to learn something about her being a Trion soldier magnet. After Replica measures her Trion, it turns out this, along with her being able to predict when they attack, is a side effect of her having an absurdly high amount of it. And neighbours want to capture people with high levels of Trion to use as tools of war or as resources. We get a glimpse of Chika's backstory, as Osamu knew her as his tutor's little sister, and learns about how her friend went missing when she told her about Tryon soldiers following her. And then her brother disappears without a trace as well, leaving her traumatized to the point of being unable to ask for help. Yuma and Osamu discuss this, as well as the question if Chika is Osamu's girlfriend, which is clearly ridiculous. As we all know, Chika will form a polycule between Yuma and Yuzuru. But then, everything changed when the Miwa Nation attacked. So Miwa Squad comes over and discovers the replica, and he's like, "We shoot first and ask questions later. Let's get rid of this dirty neighbor."
I thought you were gonna do a Zuko voice there, given the Miwa Nation thing, but
oh shit! I can't do Dante Bosco, unfortunately, but it will be great. But yeah, it's a great time to read that example of a militarized defense force being very keen of shooting civilians. Love myself some of that.
Oh dear, oh dear.
But not only is Miwa an excellent shot, utilizing a special weight trigger that pins his opponent down, he also has very competent teammates that assist him. Like Yanea, whose Scorpion Blade, customized into a spear, can't even be avoided by Yuma or Narasaka, and Kodera, the two snipers who make it difficult for Yuma to move around with much freedom. So Chika comes around to Yuma being a neighbor rather quickly, seeing that he is a good guy, while Jin decides to not respond to Osamu's call for help and just watches from the shadows, predicting Yuma will win the duel. And so he does, demonstrating his ability to copy the other triggers with his own. In the end, Jin negotiates a deal with Miwa Squad, other than Miwa himself, vouching for Yuma and promising that he won't be a threat to Border. But also, as Miwa bails out, uses an escape trigger to return to Border HQ, we see an example of Ashihara's sociological storytelling we mentioned before in the previous episodes. How the first-scale invasion has shaped people's view of the conflict, and how, for example, Yonea has had his immediate family unaffected, basically, by the invasions, so he doesn't really mind Yuma being a neighbor and is able to interact with him. Kodera and Narasaka pretty much resenting neighbors because the houses were destroyed, so the pretty apprehensive of Yuma throughout the series. And Miwa's sister being dead, so he wants them dead, all of them, with no discrimination. As we close the volume, Yuma's fate is uncertain. Border knows of his existence and orders Jin to execute him, to gain Yuma's powerful Black Trigger under their control. Black Trigger being a trigger made from a dying person's trying gland. And that's how the volume ends. So, general thoughts?
Well, this definitely, it was a very pivotal volume in terms of the plot, since we move quite swiftly on from the incident of the abnormal gates onto the internal conflict of whether Border will accept Yuma or not, which I think makes a lot of sense in terms of this story being about Osamu and Yuma slowly finding out about the world around them. It then makes sense for this sort of conflict to arise within this organization they're trying to work within. So, yeah, that was definitely interesting. You touched on this, how different people in the World Trigger universe have different ways they respond to trauma. You have, everyone in Miwa Squad, besides Yonea, is basically resents the neighbors because of all the damage that they've done to their lives and to the people they love. Whereas, in the case of Chika, she doesn't resent neighbors at all. She's very quick to accept Yuma and seems to be quite willing to put herself in harm's way to prevent people from being attacked by them.
It's true. She is able to kind of recognize the individuality in the other, while Miwa generalizes in his hate. But also, Chika assigns the blame to herself and Miwa at the other, neither of which I think the series means to present as very healthy. I've kind of noticed throughout the series that neither wants to make the blame less abstract or do anything about it until it makes them kind of mentally self-destruct. Okay, this will be a spoiler, so like skipped minute or 30 seconds. So Miwa has a chance to learn later who kills his sister, but kind of decides to pass it by because all neighbors are our enemies, so he dismisses the information from the neighbor he's talking to.
Yeah, right. I'd actually sort of forgotten about that, so it'll be interesting to get back to that when we're on this read through.
Spoiler corner. I've spoiled my co-host on some information. Great.
spoiled the co-host who has already read this series through once and watched the anime through this segment. Well done, me. So to go more into Chica, I found the aliens using humans as a resource in a war. It reminds me a lot of the book series Animorphs. Where that one's less using humans as batteries and more like they're very easy to manipulate and use as soldiers by the evil aliens, and then the good aliens kind of recruit people into it. But yeah, it's always an interesting angle with the aliens to have the humans kind of be an incidental thing in their plans. They're not like Earth isn't target number one. It's just like a stepping stone for their larger purpose. I forgot that Renji was like 20 and not a teenager like Osamu, which makes a lot more sense because he's meant to be his tutor, but I assumed he was just like an older kid at school.
You see, I had the same with Jin. For the longest time, I thought he was like 16, and then it turns out he's 19. So I really don't like a part of Jin's introduction.
Yeah, I could have definitely done without the predatorial aspects, which don't even become much of a thing with him. Like, they're very quickly played down.
He does this like twice in the manga. Also later on out of nowhere with Kumagai, but I don't know. He is this relaxed, chill manipulator of events, and also he's a sexual harasser.
Yeah, it's like, it would be totally cool because he generally does have this whole demeanor of just being someone who sort of who riles people up or makes them feel weird just by his quirkiness, and you can do that without him being a sexual harasser. Like, I do love the way he just appears behind people with crackers. I put it in my notes as teleports behind you with cracker no jutsu. It's a very funny recurring gag.
My point being, anyway, that they did try to water down this moment in the anime. He doesn't slap anyone's ass, so he just flirts with Sawamura, which at the point where I thought he was 16, while she is 25, I thought, okay, you've made this kind of even more creepy, but yeah, okay, that's less of an age difference, okay.
Yeah. Also, yeah, the way that Jin explains bailout after the Miwa Squad fight is... I found it really funny because I just thought he was just casually mentioning it as if he was just reflecting on it, and then I completely missed like the panel right next to it is Yuma saying, "Wow, he flew," like he's saying it in response to that. But I just thought it was like, man, that bailout. when you run out of Trion, sometimes you just want to like, what's he doing?
It's my headcanon that Jin is completely stoned throughout the whole series. And it's that's where his future visions come from. It's not a side effect. It's not anything. He's just like, dude, I can see the future.
I like Ashihara's description of him as a high-risk, high-return character because he finds him hard to draw, but also his chapters do really, really well in the Shonen Jump polls. Speaking of, I think it's time for us to transition to our regular section, that is the author comments section. Yes, this has some quite a few gems. I like that it continues the trend of using Osamu as a measuring stick for Trion soldiers. Even though this one's a bit less comedic. He's just talking about the Banda and how, like, because it's a bit easier to beat than the Ilgar or the Marmod, it got beaten by Osamu.
Oh, I've got one. He doesn't only put shade on Osama, also on the border staff, like how in the character bios of all the middle-aged men
they're
in
all
the border
single.
staff, all single or divorced, kind of suggesting how the dedication to installing a paramilitary rule in Mikado results in some relationship problems in the private life.
Kinuta, you screwed your shit up, man. I
Yeah.
also like to bound seal, very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. Like he has to repeat it, that it's that dangerous. There's also the detail of like Miwa's bio at the very end of the volume is like, he's always angry, but his forehead is covered with hair. So it's hard to draw a convincing angry face. Not a very functional design. I'd like to give him a haircut one of these days. And then then the other one I liked was on Jin, where he's like, he has the same silhouette as Arashiyama, so it's rumored that one of them will get an afro or a mohawk as his next power-up.
Why did you draw them like that?
Anyway, that's all my author comment section.
Probably mine as well. When we transition into random observations, maybe I'm gonna find a different one, but for now, I'm a bit lost in my notes. Anyway, from the general thoughts, so although it's not exactly humorless, this volume went into some very tense action that I generally don't expect from the series. It's a bit different than what we experienced later on.
Yeah, I thought the action in this volume was generally a lot stronger than Volume 1, where I felt like that one only really had one fight that stuck out, with the encounter in the school where Yuma fights using Osamu's trigger. This had both the Ilgar encounter, which it made good use of space and the kind of tactics these Trion soldiers are made to use, and then of course you have the Yuma versus Miwa squad match, which I think is at the very least a good primer for what the bulk of the action will be like. So very team-based and very strategic.
I also forgot how amazing Ashihara's art can look. There is a standout artwork in the panel where Kitora climbs up the giant bridge to reach the Ilgar in Chapter 8. So it looks like not only Osamu, but Daisuke Ashihara himself is a fan of bridges, since it's the most dynamic panel in the chapter. The Chapter 9 cover, shaded characters with white outlines on a darker background, I think it just looks very neat.
Yeah. That pretty much covers everything I have to say about action in this volume. I guess to get back to Chika, Ashihara, I find it interesting that Ashihara claims that Chika is a character type he's not good at. So when you consider that she is she is one of the main characters and she gets a lot of attention. So either this could just be him being humble about it, or maybe it's a sign that he really likes to challenge himself and throw himself into character types he's not entirely confident about writing.
I mean, he succeeded in that regard, since it's the character I think is the most developed out of all the cast. Even though I would prefer to her having, I guess, more to say in her introductions, since it's mostly just Yuma, Osamu, and Replica talking. I like how we establish a lot of character arc stuff that's going to be developed later throughout the series, like her aversion to being helped and obsession with thinking she's a bother to everyone. So, yeah.
Yeah. We also get like her two side effects hinted at here. One of them outright stated, which is her ability to her ability to detect neighbors. I wanted to kind of do talk a little bit about the top brass. I find it interesting that Kyoko Sawamura is introduced with the rest of them when she doesn't really feature with them that much. I guess she is only an assistant director, so it kind of makes sense.
I mean, she is one of the major staff members, but she doesn't generally get featured in cover images and in the openings, because she's a woman, so she's just featured with the operators. For some reason, she's not an operator.
Yeah, I do find it very interesting that, like, it's quite notable that all the directors have very distinct roles, except for Rindo, who's just listed as Tamakoma branch director, which that leads you to believe maybe there's something in particular about Tamakoma Branch, the fact that one of the top brass is the leader of it. So that's interesting food for thought.
There's not really much introduced about him since he's basically Lieutenant Hughes.
Yeah, he's Mace Hughes. He's gonna be a character that everyone really loves who isn't in the manga very much. Yeah, we also the introduction of these characters gives us a lot of insight into how Border is run, how property damage and public sponsors are a very real factor here, and this is neat because I think it makes the world feel a lot more authentic than just having everyone be very weighted towards this is how they fight.
Oh, right. One of my standout panels was the one where Kido says, "There's no place in my organization for Border who can't obey Border rules." With the logo behind him, it was really striking. I really enjoyed that one.
Yeah, you get a sense of him as someone who has a distinctly aggressive stance against neighbors, and how Miwa does kind of act. The fact that he acts on his behalf, he's very much acting as a proxy for that as well as having his own motivations, of course. Yeah. Also, Netsuki is dodgy. Like, the fact that he's like, oh yeah, as a result of this guy, the entire town is just totally cool with Border here with basically no pushback. It's like a major propaganda machine right there.
Yeah, it's not like we're expecting similar things on a daily basis these days. Never mind. Anyway, right, all the character establishing stuff was really good. I forgot that Osamu's Osamu being suggested to not be the hero everyone expects him to be, and being motivated by regret, his weakness.
Yes.
I forgot that this was the moment that got introduced so early on.
One thing that I did notice is that, like, it doesn't, when they explain Trion bodies, they don't draw too much attention to the wow factor of them being impervious to regular damage, which would have been weird to me on a first read, but in hindsight, I think this is a good call, since it's not really notable in the long term. The series is very much based around them fighting mainly Trion opponents.
I do like Miwa's maneuver when he gets the info out of Osamu that he met with a neighbor. I thought this was quite clever. Like, World Trigger's full of tacticians, but I forgot that he was supposed to be kind of one of them, and yeah, I really like that.
Yeah, like, and they play into the way that combat works as well. You see, like, Kodara's confusion. It kind of reinforces the importance of what people know in a fight, back, when he assumes that Yuma has seen him, rather than the actual reality of Yuma's side effect. And a lot of the time, how much an opponent knows about who they're fighting is very, very much affects how they fight, and then how said opponent has to adjust their tactics to account for it.
Yeah, that's right. That's all from my general thoughts, but I think we've kind of transitioned into random observations.
Yep, I'll go through my volume notes. Osamu, good boy, he gives Tricked Kitora credit immediately after she assumes that he's just trying to take it for himself. Give him head pats.
Give him head pats.
Also, just continuing to fuel that ever popular Osamu Kitora ship.
Is it a popular ship in the fandom, really?
Okay, to be honest, I don't know.
I don't know if it's just Chris's obsession with it, or just...
Yeah. Speaking of weekly manga recap, I think the more I go into this, the more curious I am to know when that particular podcast turned around on Yuma, because I'm finding that even early on, Yuma's being a lot more considerate than you might expect for his very bouncy personality. Like, you had Replica's whole monologue on why he's not fighting back against Miwa Squad, and how he's doing it to cover Osamu because he's just gotten a foot in the door with really getting somewhere in Border. So yeah, there's already a lot of nuances to his character, beyond just he's goofy and overpowered.
I mean, I totally get them just half reading it. There wasn't the craze back then, and also the rotation system in Jump doesn't really serve itself well to, like, all the manga that they publish being closely read through. So
yeah, some series I do just find I process much better reading through them in bulk rather than keeping up with them week to week. What other thoughts do I have?
I have some thoughts. So the anime kind of emphasizes more of Osamu being kind of a goober. In the scene where Replica splits up and goes with Osamu when he's taking care of all the civilians during the Ilga attack, he just floats around him in the manga. He goes inside his shirt and Osamu's like, "Whoa!" in the anime. It's in the manga it's treated way more seriously, and I was surprised with that. But again, I do like how even in his first action scene against the band, Osamu is still kind of sweaty and awkward and stumbles and makes mistakes, and he really is a great underdog. I do love him.
Yeah, I do actually have a nitpick for this volume. And usually I'm not really the type of person to get into, this is a bit of an illogical loophole, blah blah blah. But World Trigger does have such an internally consistent universe that I guess I look for it more. I would have liked an explanation for why Border never noticed the rads. Because obviously, I get why Yuma is the first person to realize it's a problem, because he has experience in the neighbor worlds. But I don't really buy that there are just these Treon soldiers that are as big as, like, a large cat, just running around, that nobody saw them beforehand, and it's not really made clear that, like, that they was ever sighted. Like, I could have easily gone with the explanation of, like, they'd seen them and just shrugged them off, or, like, never acknowledged them because, like, that they don't seem to be doing any harm, just like, yeah, we'll just whatever. So yeah, that is one little issue I had. Perhaps Cougar has a better idea of how to search for them in their hiding.
Yes, especially since like he had experience with them, so that makes sense.
I have a couple more. Miwa's scarf is very dope. I'm always a sucker for, like, the long scarf as a little accessory feature to make a character look more stylish. It's that long thing blowing in the wind.
I forgot how Jin was kind of Osamu's senpai early on. I love the panel where Jin, like, calls Osamu Four Eyes and says he's counting on him, and he's like, "Oh, senpai noticed me. He remembered he remembered how he called me that time." And it's pretty ironic that's
we all get nervous around Jin senpai.
It's ironic that later that's how everyone calls him. So
yeah. Yeah, I guess, and then, like, I think my last note is that Yoneya being Shiori's cousin wasn't something I remembered at all. I don't think the two of them interact a terribly huge amount, but I guess it's a neat little detail.
I love several parts of Jin's introduction. How he's this relaxed and chill character, but also Jin, seeing how small Yuma is. You're puny! It's just a funny translation choice that I don't know. I really liked it. I think I think they've had a lot of fun with it. I love how Miwa's squad's emblem is just two snakes wrapped around a bowling pin for some reason.
I feel like the snakes were probably Miwa's idea, because he wanted something, like, sort of edgy and reptilian, and then Yoneya just threw in the bowling pin just for shits and giggles.
That's about all my notes, so shall we transition into the spoiler corner?
Spoiler corner! Alright, so let's see. I had a few things to go into.
Totally have a jingle for that.
Spoiler corner!
So skip ahead 2 minutes to avoid spoilers.
I forgot about Chica's side effect of being able to detect neighbors, because it's not really been used much since, they've been in the rank wars, so they've all entirely been fighting human opponents. So maybe it'll come up in the invasion. Who knows? In the expedition arc. I found it interesting that Miwa has disregard for Tamakoma branch. He calls them traitors. It's clearly feeding into him being in the same boat as Kido due to the Tamakoma branch's different angle of being a kind of an offshoot.
Yeah.
And then, also, Yuma's seals. Are they still used? Chance of them being used again? Copy ability OP. And I'd be very interested to see particularly how Bound could be combined with other powers, because later on, we learn that people can share their Treon with other people. So if you get someone with a very high Treon level, like, how could he use his various abilities with that much?
Oh my god, using what's it called? Using boost on Chica. Can you imagine?
Yes, exactly. I really hope Ashihara does that at some point in like one of the big fights.
I'm really not used to Yuma using his seals. They disappear for a majority part of the series, and the combat system becomes so fair and balanced TMCR.
I forget. Have Border said that they're going to be like getting him to use it again in the expedition or not? I'd imagine they would. Like they want all the cards they can have on that mission. So
I imagine that they'll do the same as with the second large scale invasion. They'll be like, look, you can use it. If you do, then we monitor and we order where you go, and you can't go with Osama and Chica.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that covers all my spoilery things. Okay, and now shall we go on to questions?
We got a smooth transition from one of the things we discussed to the next one, but yeah, the question that we got is actually about Yuma seals. So I think it was Randall Jr. 55, which might be my newest patron, who actually supported the show on patreon.com/Wensleydale Cheddar. He got a World Trigger avatar, and so can you.
Do it.
Anyway, the question is, just how strong are Yuma's Black Trigger multipliers? The highest number we see is Scepter used to yank the Ilgar out of the sky. So what would a Scepter shield, bound, chain, or anchor be like?
Yes, I'd assume that like he meant bolt as well as instead of chain, because we know what chain does.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I like to imagine bolt is just like unlimited blade works from Fate, where he just summons loads of projectiles behind him. Shield, I could just see like a full body force field type thing. Boost and bound would be very interesting. Bound would become like the repulse from the Force Unleashed, where you just send out a massive shockwave, completely devastating everything around you.
You see, you've got very interesting comparisons. I've just got a very boring answer. Since the Scepter chain was used against the Ilgar, I was just thinking, okay, I guess if that's the point of comparison, Ilgar is like the size of an elementary school. That makes sense. So a Scepter bolt would be like a projectile that could defeat an Ilgar in a single shot. Scepter shield would be a shield that could repel an Ilgar. Scepter anchor would be a weight that would pin an Ilgar down, and so on and so forth.
Okay. Well, it's interesting because we're getting into a lot of discussion of like how could Ashihara continue to combine the different powers as we move into like much stronger end game opponents, and how he could have some real huge damage dealers, and like I'm sort of like I'd think it would be really cool to see how he'd function on that kind of level, but at the same time, I hope he doesn't succumb to power creep in the way that some shows do, but he doesn't really seem like the kind of author that would. So it doesn't seem like it would be too much of a problem.
Let's get to the plugs. So that was the second episode of Duckface Diaries. You can follow the show on anchor.fm/Wensleydale Cheddar. That's where all the links are, and you can also find the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Breaker, Radio Public, Pocket Casts, Google Podcasts, everywhere. If you don't know what the links are, you can find them all on Anchor. That's, again, anchor.fm/Wensleydale Cheddar. That's where all the links are.
Yes. So join us next time. We're going to cover Volume 3, which includes chapters 17 to 25. And, you anime people are lucky. You got 5 episodes this time. That's 9 to 13. It's going to be interesting seeing all the different, because obviously different episodes adapt at different rates. So seeing how the variations in episode numbers are going to end up. So, yeah. That's what we're covering next time.
I think the most interesting one will be volume 12, which is episodes 45 to 47, and also 64 plus 65 because of the filler arc.
Yeah. Yes.
Deciding what to do with that also will be interesting.
Yeah, I'd just say we recommend the corresponding anime episodes to what's being adapted, but we do give mention of the filler arc, and it's your choice to skip it.
We can also do it as a patron bonus. That's also a possibility.
Maybe. Yeah, no. I know. Like the last episode of season 1 of the anime adapts, like it clumps together a bunch of chapters because they wanted to have the resolution to what was going on, but also just have a lot of wrap up. So yeah. Anyway, that's all from me.
Right then. You can follow us, me on Twitter at Wensley Cheddar, him on Twitter at Hoven with an H. Check out Hoven's podcast, Hoven's Hideaway, a variety, mostly manga podcast, as well as our streams on twitch.tv/Wensleydale Cheddar.
Yeah, so we like to alternate between the Stammer Nuzlocke and my read through of Sakura Beach.
That was an interesting one. If you'd like to help me upload these on a regular basis, consider supporting me on patreon.com/Wensleydale Cheddar. In return for your support, you get access to rewards such as an entire backlog of manga and anime reviews. At the $6 tier, you can access bonus manga thread of Assassination Classroom, which is nice. And also at this tier, at the $6 tier, you can have a World Trigger avatar, a Duckface avatar, like we do here on YouTube. So check out that. You just need to provide me a reference picture, I suppose. Also, thank you very much to Randall and Alex, who decided to become my patrons. And yeah, thank you very much. I'm overwhelmed. If you join them, you can make me reach my next goal of doing a long-form Demon Slayer video essay, which will also make me read Demon Slayer for the first time, the entirety of it, so looking forward to that. We're just $12 away from it, I think. And also, check out Manga Mosaic. This is the mini podcast series where we take a look at Jumpstart and one-shots old and new, and take a look at basically other Shonen Jump series, and Jump Plus or other series in general. You can find this along with Duckface Diaries at youtube.com/c/Wensleydale Cheddar. Anything else we want to mention?
Yes. If there's anything that you wish we'd covered in this volume, please comment below, and we could easily talk about it next episode. Because I've noticed that's one thing that the Nen Show podcasts do. Often, like, if people have responses in the comments, they'll bring them up at the start of the next episode. So, yeah, I'd be up for that.
And send us your emails, questions, comments, suggestions to wensleydale012@gmail.com.
All right.
Or just comment under an episode or a tweet that we make. So, this was the second episode of Duckface Diaries, and as always, it's time to
bugger off!